All right, so get ready because we're about to tackle memory. And I think we're going to have some assumptions challenged here. You guys sent in some really fascinating material on this, excerpts from The Memory Illusion by Julia Shaw and an article from Maclean's. So we're taking a deep dive into how our memories work, or maybe more accurately, how they don't work, at least not how we often think they do.
Yeah, it's so intriguing because we tend to view our memories as these perfect recordings, almost like a video that we can just rewind. But both of these sources really highlight how memory is so much more complex than that. It's constantly being reconstructed and reshaped.
Yeah, it's like we think our brains work like computers, you
Yeah.
know, just storing these files away neatly. But if that were true, wouldn't we remember everything perfectly?
Exactly. And that's where this idea of the gushy brain
Mm.
comes in from the Maclean's article. Instead of these fixed files, our memories are built from these connections between neurons.
Mm.
And these connections are super flexible. They're constantly changing based on our experiences and our thoughts.
Okay, so it's not about storage, it's about connections. And these connections are always in flux. So does that mean every time we remember something, we're essentially rewriting it? Just a little.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah, the very act of recall can modify the memory.
Mm.
And this starts happening surprisingly quickly. I mean, even short-term memory is incredibly fleeting. It only lasts for about 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Oh my gosh, I can barely remember what I had for breakfast, let alone something from 30 seconds ago. That just seems like a recipe for disaster.
You're not wrong. Think about it. When you meet someone new at a party, your brain's trying to process so much information at once. You know their name, their face, what they're wearing, their vibe. You're trying to figure out, are they friend or foe?
Right.
So it's no wonder that name just disappears into the ether
Mm.
before you can even offer them a drink.
So our brains are prioritizing what seems important in the moment, which I guess makes sense from an evolutionary perspective.
Mhm.
But what are the implications of this? This constant memory reconstruction.
Well, it means that our memories are far more susceptible to distortion than we realize. They're influenced by our emotions, our current knowledge, and even conversations that we have with other people.
Okay, so it's not just about what happened. It's how we feel about it, what we
Yeah.
know now, and even how other people remember it. That's a lot to unpack.
It is, and Julia Shaw's research really takes this even further by demonstrating just how susceptible our memories are to outside suggestion. She's actually been able to implant entirely false memories in people.
Hey, hold on. So she can make people believe they did things. That never happened. That just sounds like straight out of science fiction.
It does, doesn't it? But her studies show that it's surprisingly possible. In fact, she was able to implant false memories of criminal activity in 70% of her study participants.
70%. That's a huge number. Wow, that's both amazing and slightly terrifying. So what exactly does this implanting process, what does that look like?
It's a gradual process. She uses a combination of visualization techniques and repeated interviews over time. So participants are asked to imagine a scenario that never actually happened, describe it in detail, and then revisit that memory over several sessions.
So by repeatedly imagining and describing this fictional event, it starts to feel real, like practicing a lie until you believe it yourself.
That's a good analogy. And what's remarkable is the vividness of these implanted memories. Participants recall sensory details like smells, tastes, even the color of the sky, just as if it were a real experience.
That's mind-blowing. So it's not just that they intellectually believe that the event happened, but they have this whole sensory experience attached to it.
Exactly. It really highlights how easily our brains can be tricked, blurring the lines between imagination and actual memory. And it's not just limited to these elaborate scenarios. Even the simple act of putting a memory into words, whether we're speaking or writing, can subtly change the memory itself.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this gushy brain can be both a blessing and a curse. If simply talking about a memory can change it. What happens when we share memories with other people?
That's where things get even more interesting. Our social interactions play a huge role in shaping our memories. Shaw describes this as consensus group memory.
Consensus group memory, what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so imagine you and a friend witness the same event. You each have your own individual memories. But as you talk about it, you start to incorporate elements of each other's recollections. Because over time, you develop this shared version of events, a consensus, which might actually differ from either of your original memories.
So it's like a memory mashup, where individual recollections just blend together to create this group narrative. That sounds like a recipe for confusion, especially if you're trying to piece together what really happened.
It can be.
Yeah.
And it has fascinating implications for how we understand, history, eyewitness testimony, even our own personal narratives.
It makes you wonder how much of what we remember is actually a product of our social interactions rather than our own direct experiences. That's a pretty unsettling thought.
It is. It really underscores the need to be critical thinkers, to question our own assumptions about memory, and to consider alternative perspectives.
So our memories are constantly being constructed
Aber.
and reconstructed, influenced by our emotions, our current knowledge, and our social interactions. And on top of that, we can even have entirely false memories implanted without even realizing it.
Yes, and as we delve deeper into these sources, we'll see how these factors play out in real-life situations, with some surprising and perhaps even disturbing consequences.
Okay, I'm officially hooked. We've only just scratched the surface here, and I'm already questioning everything I thought I knew about memory. Where do we go from here?
So we've been talking about how our memories are kind of like constantly evolving stories, influenced by so many factors. But where it gets really interesting is when we look at those supposedly rock-solid memories, the ones that just feel like they're burned into our brains.
Yeah. Oh, you mean those flashbulb memories, right?
Yeah.
Like where you were when you first heard about some major event. Yeah, those always feel so vivid, so real.
Exactly. They feel different, more intense. But even those are susceptible to the same distortions and reconstructions we've been talking about.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that even those super emotional, crystal clear memories aren't necessarily accurate, but they feel so real?
I know it's tricky, because it's about feeling as much as fact. The McLean's article actually had some great examples of this. One person vividly recalled watching the Challenger disaster on TV in their high school classroom.
What?
But it turns out their family had moved away from that town 2 years before.
Oh, wow. So their brain created this whole scene full of emotion around an event that they couldn't even have witnessed. That's fascinating and a little unsettling.
It is. And there's another example where someone had this super detailed memory of meeting Bugs Bunny at Disneyland. The problem is, Warner Bros. Characters aren't even at Disneyland.
Okay, now I'm starting to question. All my childhood memories, did I really meet Mickey Mouse? Or did my brain just get a little creative?
Well, it's not about doubting everything, but just being open to the possibility that even our strongest memories can be influenced by what we've heard, what we've seen, or even just imagined over time.
Right. Okay, so if even flashbulb memories can be distorted, what hope do the rest of our memories have? It's like our brains are playing tricks on us.
In a way, yes, but these tricks aren't malicious. They're actually how our brains, trying to make sense of the world. Remember, memory isn't about perfect recall. It's about creating this coherent narrative of our lives.
So it's more about telling ourselves a good story than getting all the facts straight. So does that mean there's no such thing as a truly accurate memory?
Well, it's more nuanced than that. While some details might shift, the core of a memory can still be valid. I mean, think about it. If someone pointed a gun at you, you'd likely remember that intense detail very vividly.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. The emotional intensity would probably solidify that part of the memory.
Exactly. But other details, like what the person was wearing, what day of the week it was, those might get blurry, or even change over time.
So how do we separate, the wheat from the chaff? How can we tell which parts of our memories are reliable and which parts might have been, embellished or even fabricated?
That's the million-dollar question. And while there's no foolproof method, there are some things we can do to become more discerning about our own memories.
Okay, give us some tips. I'm ready to start fact-checking my own brain.
Well, first, it's important to be aware of those potential influences we've been talking about. So if a memory feels particularly vivid or emotionally charged, just take a step back and ask yourself, could my feelings be shaping how I remember this?
So don't just accept those intense memories at face value. Dig a little deeper. Try to see if there are other factors at play.
Exactly, and be mindful of how you talk about your memories. Leading questions, even seemingly innocent ones, can plant suggestions in your mind and actually change the memory itself.
Oh, it's like that game of telephone where the message gets distorted with each retelling. Except in this case, we're retelling the story to ourselves.
That's a great analogy. And just like in that game, the more we retell a memory, the further it might drift from the original event.
So what can we do? Should we just stop talking about our memories altogether? That seems a bit extreme.
Not at all. Sharing memories is a natural and important part of being human. It helps us connect with others and make sense of our lives. But we can do it in a way that minimizes distortion.
Okay, how? Give us some practical advice.
One simple strategy is to be more cautious about the language you use. So instead of saying, I know this happened, try saying, this is what I remember. That slight shift in phrasing acknowledges the possibility of error and invites other perspectives.
So it's about being open to the idea that our memories might not be the perfect objective truth we once thought they were.
That's a great way to put it. Another helpful tip is to corroborate your memories whenever possible. So if you have a strong memory of an event, try to find other sources of information that can either support or challenge your recollection.
So talk to other people who are there. Look for photos or videos. Check for any written documentation. It's like being a detective for your own memories.
Exactly. It's about gathering evidence and being open to the possibility that what you remember might not align perfectly with what actually happened.
And this is especially important in situations where the accuracy of memory is crucial, like in legal cases or historical research, right?
Absolutely. Julia Shaw's work with cold cases highlights how even the slightest suggestion can influence a witness's memory, potentially leading to wrongful convictions.
Wow, so it's not just about protecting ourselves from our own memory biases. It's about understanding that these biases can have real-world consequences for others.
Precisely. And that brings us to another important point. While it's crucial to be skeptical of our own memories, it's equally important to be compassionate towards ourselves and others.
Compassionate? How so?
Well, we all make mistakes. Our memories are not infallible, and that's okay. Instead of beating ourselves up over faulty recollections, we can choose to view them as opportunities for learning and growth.
So cut ourselves some slack when we forget things, and try to be more patient with others when their memories don't perfectly align with ours.
Exactly. Remembering that everyone's brain processes information differently, and that our memories are constantly being shaped by our experiences, our emotions, and even our conversations with others.
Yeah, this has been incredibly insightful. We've gone from thinking of memories as these fixed recordings to seeing them as these fluid, evolving narratives shaped by a myriad of factors.
It's like we've been given this backstage pass
Uh-huh.
to the theater of our minds, seeing how the sets are built, the lighting is adjusted, and the script is constantly being rewritten.
And while it might seem a bit chaotic at times, it's also incredibly beautiful and fascinating. It makes you appreciate the complexity and resilience of the human brain.
I completely agree. It's a reminder that we're all works in progress, constantly evolving and adapting to new information. And our memories are a reflection of that journey.
This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. I'm already starting to question my own memories and looking for ways to corroborate my recollections. What else can we do to become more mindful of our memories?
One more thing that comes to mind is the importance of self-care. Stress, fatigue, even certain medications can impact our cognitive function, including memory.
So getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, managing stress levels, all of these things can actually improve our memory. It sounds almost too simple.
It might sound simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Our brains need the right fuel and the right environment to function optimally, and that includes creating and retrieving accurate memories.
So it's not just about being aware of the potential pitfalls of memory, but it's about actively taking care of our brains so they can do their best work.
Exactly. It's like tending a garden. We need to provide the right conditions for our memories to flourish.
Okay, so be mindful of potential influences. Be cautious about our language. Corroborate our memories whenever possible. Be compassionate towards ourselves and others. And prioritize self-care.
That's a great summary. And if you can do all that, you'll be well on your way to navigating this complex world of memory with more awareness and understanding.
I'm feeling much more equipped to handle my own gushy brain now. But before we wrap up, there's one question I still have. What happens when someone has a false memory implanted, like in Julia Shaw's research? Do they just walk around with that false memory forever?
Well, it's not quite that straightforward. Julia Shaw, she actually has a debriefing process where she explains to her participants that the memory that they've been recalling was fabricated.
Oh, wow. So she tells them the truth, that the event never actually happened. I imagine that must be a pretty wild experience to have your reality kind of turned upside down like that.
Yeah, it really is. And to make sure it really sinks in, she encourages them to talk to their parents who were actually in on the study and can confirm that the event never took place. It's like trying to unbake a cake, carefully deconstructing that false memory and replacing it with the truth.
That makes sense, but it also raises another question for me. Is it possible that even after being told that the memory is fake, that some traces of it might linger, like a phantom limb of memory?
That's exactly what Shaw suspects. And it really speaks to how powerful these implanted memories can be, even when we know they're not real.
The McLean's article mentioned an example of this, right? Something about a singer's funeral.
Yeah, there's this woman who vividly remembers attending Lulu's funeral procession, which, of course, never happened because Lulu is still very much alive, and performed.
That's both hilarious and a little bit creepy. To have this detailed memory of something that never happened, and then to see that person alive and well, it's almost like living in two realities at once.
It is. And she even describes how it weirds her out every time she sees Lulu on TV or hears one of her songs. It really highlights how these false memories can just stick with us, even when we know they're not based in reality.
Okay, so I think we can all agree that our memories are far more malleable and less reliable than we might realize. We've also learned some really helpful tips for being more mindful of our own memories and the memories that are shared by others. But what's the big takeaway here? What do we do with this newfound understanding of memory?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is compassion. Compassion for ourselves and compassion for others. We all make mistakes, and our memories are not exempt from that. So instead of getting caught up in who's right or wrong, we can choose to view these imperfections as opportunities for understanding and growth.
So cut ourselves some slack when we forget things, and try to be more patient with others when their memories don't perfectly align with ours.
Exactly. Remembering that everyone's brain processes information differently, and our memories are constantly being shaped by our experiences, our emotions, even our conversations with others.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive. We've gone from thinking of memories as these static recordings to seeing them as these dynamic, evolving narratives. It's both humbling and empowering.
I agree. It is humbling to realize that our memories are not always accurate, but it's also empowering to know that we have some agency in how we shape and interpret those memories.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the fascinating world of memory illusions. If you've enjoyed this exploration, I encourage you to check out Julia Shaw's book, The Memory Illusion, and that McLean's article. They both offer some incredible insights. And we'll leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about how your mind works.
And remember, dear listener, questioning your memories doesn't mean you're distrustful or paranoid. It just means you're engaging in critical thinking, which is so essential for navigating a world full of information and misinformation.
So embrace your curiosity, question everything, and never stop learning. Until next time, happy deep diving.